Hi everybody. So now we're at our next section of what the series that I'm calling From Rad Trad to Tradical. Today we're going to talk about the Benedict option. Many of you have heard of this concept that urges Catholics to form kind of isolated, intentional communities to preserve authentic Catholic culture. And I think this does have a legitimate place. We need to have places where we can nurture Catholic culture, raise Catholic children, and really have people experience the safety from the real dangers of modern culture. These are real problems. So I really affirm the need for this kind of thing. There's also a need for the authentic spirit, however, of St. Francis. Because the thing is, St. Benedict has the Benedict option, so to speak, involves the preservation of culture, the isolation into almost a monastic type of an idea. Whereas St. Francis moved the monastic vocation out into the streets with the friars, the mendicant, part of the mendicant movement, or the beggars going out, the friars leaving. They're not in a monastery setting anymore. The thing to remember is that too many times we end up having an inauthentic experience of the spirit of St. Francis, where we see these things that are kind of this spirituality which is focused almost like on Mother Earth in a way that seems almost pagan or neo-pagan. And we see these problems in rejoicing in the creation instead of the Creator. And the thing is, but in this we forget that essential to the Franciscan vocation. Well, Christ's words to St. Francis, rebuild my church, which you see falling into ruin. And this, I believe, is the vocation of, if you're reading these if you're watching these videos and you're responding to this, like maybe this is part of what your job is in the world. I believe our vocation, as people who value the Catholic Church, as people who are trying to follow the magisterium, trying to follow tradition, is to rebuild the church. And how are we to rebuild the church? But through these methods of building it up, through the redemption of outside ideologies, which expand its understanding, its reach, that take over new territory. We build it up by giving new techniques and understandings and psychological practices to the church, redeeming outside ideologies. We build up the church, and we rebuild the church because we take in other factions, we take in other groups, we show those groups how they become part of the church, we show other religions and other denominations how they can take the best aspects of them, up-level those things to be the best version of themselves by becoming Catholic. That's how we build the church, that's how we rebuild the church. Because here's the thing, I believe that there's a pious tradition that based on humility, St. Francis received the throne in heaven that Lucifer fell from, because Lucifer fell from that throne for pride, and St. Francis rose to it by humility. And if that's true, that's a central role in the cosmos for St. Francis. And it would make sense. Didn't he receive the stigmata from a seraph, from a high-level angel? That's not normal. That doesn't usually happen. Didn't he receive the wounds of Christ on his body, being one of those first saints who had stigmata? That's not normal. Very few people have had that in history. Recently we have St. Padre Pio. Here's the thing. What if the charism of St. Francis is an ongoing work in the church that's been developing throughout time? What if it begins with St. Francis, where it's simple rebellion against God, just like worldliness, is the problem? So we get St. Francis. Then you get stuff like, okay, instead of just mere worldliness of rebellion, you get a revolution. St. Maximilian Kolbe, who's a Franciscan, he sees the Freemasons, marching in Rome. They're talking about how they're going to bring down the church in various ways. Different things. So here's the thing. He founds the Militia Immaculata, and he develops what's called the Franciscan Marian Charism. This is very significant because he develops this thing of like, okay, the Immaculate is deeply rooted. He starts evangelizing. He's very prolific in evangelizing the world for the Immaculate. We call it the Immaculata. and they founds the Militia Immaculata. And he opposes the revolution of secularism, Freemasonry. Secularism being the type of ideology that Freemasonry tends to lead to. But what if there's another phase that we're in now to which many are being called, or to which you can see the reflections of this? So, for example, you can see this next charism, this next level of Franciscan charism, in the community founded by John Michael Talbot in the modern times, where you can see elements of this in the community of the Franciscan Friars of the Atonement, some of that charism of bringing things together. You could see these things, especially in John Michael Talbot's community. You really can see this charism of integration and this Franciscan flavor of integrating all these different things. And I believe that this is the development through time of how to rebuild the church. So through time, you see things like, all right, you even see this also, like you said, it's John Michael Talbot. You also can see this in Chiara Lubick, with the Focolare movement. Because she kind of derives from, she was a Third Order Franciscan, and so there's some Franciscan resonance here. And she's about bringing together everything in unity. So here's the thing. The church has seen that, and the church has seen that this is a real charism. These are approved organizations. So we can see this idea that there is this real movement toward unity. And so the things I'm talking about are already been approved by the church. The same kind of thing is already approved. So this is a real deal. This is the real stuff. But I believe that throughout time, you have the Franciscan charism. St. Francis gets the throne that Lucifer would have. He worked against rebellion against God, worldliness, by making the Franciscans. Then St. Maximilian takes it and goes against Freemasonry and makes the Franciscan Marian charism. And now we see people like John Michael Talbot integrating all things, and so that's really the thing, is that we see this movement toward integration. And I think that that's what it is, that there's these different ways in which the Franciscan charism changes in response to what's going on in the world. And that it becomes now, in the modern times, a ministry of reconciliation that sets the stage for the Marian age. And I think that's really going on. This is the St. Francis option, instead of necessarily the Benedict option. And so the thing is, I think that's really, that's really, I think, what's going on in this, in this thing. And I think that this is what we are called to. We are called to rebuild. Those words, rebuild my church. That's what we're called to, I think. And I think that this thing that I'm talking about, this blueprint, gives us a way of how, by integrating and reconciling all things, this is the method by which we can do it, through Mary and according to the principles of the Incarnation.